Hello, I'm Dale Bone from Dale Bone Imaging. This is Aurora Hunting 101. Welcome to episode 4. How should I plan my first Aurora outing? If you want to be successful on your first time out, it is important to do some planning. Some of the key things are, is there a good aurora forecast? 2, are there favorable conditions? 3, location, where should you go? 4, safety, make certain you have a safe experience. First, you need the aurora forecast, and there's many ways to get it. One of the most convenient is to use an Aurora app. There are many apps, and I can recommend a couple of them. Aurora Alerts is fairly simple, has the KP values, sun, moon, and simple weather information all on a single screen. My Aurora Forecast is another good one, and it has a local Aurora forecast and cloud cover information. Space Weather Live has basic and advanced Aurora information, as well as a lot of solar information. Space Weather Live, the app, and the website are my go-to for Aurora information, but it does have a lot of information, and I usually only look at one value on there. I usually recommend Aurora Alerts from people just starting out. I also recommend joining an Aurora Facebook group. Most of the provinces in Canada have a dedicated Aurora-related Facebook group. Some of these, especially in Western Canada, are quite large. And there are also Aurora hunting groups in most countries, as well as global notification groups. I'll include a list here so you can look up maybe the one for your area, or if you're in the northern US, you could look at one of the ones that is north of you. Many of these groups are quite large and have dedicated information for commonly asked questions. For example, where should I go? Is there going to be Aurora tonight? What are the camera settings I should be using if you're taking pictures? So please do a little research before you jump in there and start asking very basic questions. Some of the larger ones also have dedicated mechanisms to let you know if there's going to be Aurora that night or the forecast for that night, and ways of alerting others if Aurora become visible in the evening, some sort of notification mechanism. Some of those are as simple as there's a daily post saying that there's probably going to be Aurora tonight, and then everyone that can see the Aurora posts a picture. That's a very simple mechanism, and it works very well. Some of them, the Saskatchewan, for example, has multiple chats for different areas, and you can say, okay, I can see the Aurora in this location, and other people on the chat get messages with those notifications. That's a little more direct. So if you're on a group that doesn't have a lot of background information, frequently asked questions, that sort of thing, the Saskatchewan Aurora Hunters group does, and the Alberta Aurora Chasers group both have lots of additional information. 2, are the conditions favorable? You need to check the 2 key things. 1, is it cloudy? And 2, what is the moon doing? If there are clouds, you can't see the Aurora. The Aurora is high in the sky, far above the clouds. So if it's cloudy or even partially cloudy, you usually can't see the northern lights. If it's broken clouds and the Aurora are fairly high up in the sky, then maybe you can see them through the clouds, but it's certainly more difficult. The moon is the nemesis of Aurora, and astronomy in general. A very bright moon significantly decreases the visibility of the northern lights. So to get information on those two, your standard weather forecast includes cloud information, whether it's supposed to be cloudy or not. That's a good starting point. And it often includes some moon information, such as moonset and moonrise, sunrise and sunset, maybe, or the phase of the moon, that sort of thing. In general, full moon bad, new moon good. I use windy.com. That's both the app and the website. So the app is actually called windy.com. It has a really nice, it has a lot of weather information, but it does have you can select a cloud layer and you can see the forecast of the clouds, and you can scroll back and forth in time and see how the clouds are expected to move in your area. It also has satellite map, so at night you can see what the current cloud conditions are around you. And if the aurora is really good and you're cloudy, sometimes you can just drive away from the clouds. That's a little more advanced, but that's always an option I consider. In terms of the moon, I use dateandtime.com. It has a whole lot of sun and moon information, even though it's mainly a date and time website. But it's certainly my go-to for that. It's a little more confusing. It's got a lot of information there, but I think most people can figure it out. So number 3, location, location, location. Everybody's favorite question. So the good news is aurora is a large global phenomenon. It spans the sky, goes from east to west. There is no specific location, no magic location that you need to go to. If somebody can see the aurora in your general location, you should be able to see the aurora, assuming you're in a sufficiently dark location and you have a nice view to the north and further up, and maybe overhead, depending on the conditions. That means you don't need to drive hundreds of kilometers. You don't need to go to where somebody else is. Everybody in the same general area within 100 or 200 kilometers is seeing the same piece of the aurora at the same time. We do find that a lot of new people say, oh, tell me exactly where you are so I can go to exactly where you are so I can see the aurora as well. And that's just not the way it works. And the time it takes you to drive there, conditions might have changed and they might not be visible anymore. You're better off trying to see the aurora where you are, or go someplace close that's dark, than driving a long distance. Because the aurora is huge, it's massive, it spans the globe. It wraps all the way around the earth. Time is a factor, but not necessarily, not location. So I recommend that you go out and scout first. Scout first during the day, and try and find a nice location where you can park certainly off the highways and off major dirt roads, grid roads. Pull off, not into a field, but often there's a sort of like a driveway into the fields, approaches into the fields. Those you can pull off on there and be off the road. Don't go onto private property, but public property such as parks are good locations to go. But try and find a place during the day so you know where you're going at night, especially that first time. 4, safety. Last but certainly not least, be prepared for emergencies. Have proper clothing, extra clothes, blankets, snacks, water, cell phone charger, charge cell phone, full tank of gas. Take other safety precautions if they're important to you. My rule of thumb is you should be willing to stay overnight in your vehicle if something happens. If you're not able to stay overnight in your vehicle, you're not properly prepared, because you could have a breakdown, you could get stuck, any number of things could happen. And if you're out in the middle of nowhere, maybe nobody drives by, you should be self-sufficient to stay in your vehicle at least overnight. A lot of areas in the country have limited to no cell coverage. You might have cell coverage and drop down into a little bit of valley and not have cell coverage anymore. If possible, tell people where you're going and when you expect to be back. And if plans change, try and let them know. If possible, travel with somebody else so you have two vehicles. If something happens to one, you have another. Depending on where you are, there may be dangerous wildlife, so be prepared for that. For example, if you're in an area with bears, certainly take bear spray with you. It doesn't hurt to have some flashlights and other things with you as well. Where I live in Saskatchewan, there isn't particularly anything dangerous. Sometimes there's coyotes. Every once in a while they'll wander a little bit closer and I'll yell at them and they'll go away, but I've never been particularly worried about them. And sometimes they serenade you and howl and sing and yip away, and it's quite enjoyable. So you made a plan and you're ready for your first hunt. My rule of thumb is to wait until the KP is at least one over the minimum for your area. For example, I live in an area where usually KP3 around midnight we can see the northern lights without much problem. So I recommend that people in this area wait until KP4 before they go out. Sure, maybe you can see KP3, but it's going to be lower on the horizon. It's not going to be as interesting. If it's KP4, you're going to have a better display. You're going to have a better chance of seeing it, better chance of recognizing it, and it's going to be higher in the sky. It's going to be probably moving more. It's going to be more interesting. You're going to have a better experience. If there's a full moon, add another KP. So I don't, KP3 area, if it's not KP4 or higher and a full moon, I don't bother going out because you're not going to have good visibility of the aurora. And then I mentioned time. There's two issues with time of year and time of day. So time of year, in the summers, if you're far enough north, it doesn't get dark enough. This is why for all the famous places, aurora is a winter phenomenon, not a summer one. But certainly in large parts of Canada, you can see the northern lights all year. That doesn't mean where I live, 52 degrees north, it doesn't get completely dark in the summer, around the summer solstice for about 2 weeks on either side, maybe a little bit more. There's always a bit of glow in the northern horizon at midnight. And that's exactly where the aurora tends to be, so they compete with each other a little bit. But you can definitely see the aurora, and you can photograph it even when it's not completely dark. Second is time of night. So the aurora is not circular. It is an oval. I've described it as a donut. It's stretched though. And it's the solar winds coming from the sun that stretches it out. So it's stretched away from the sun. So at midnight, the opposite of noon when the sun is the highest in the sky and straight south, at midnight when it's straight north, that's when you are actually closest to the aurora, because that's the part of the aurora that's been stretched south. So the best time to see aurora is generally around midnight, plus or minus a couple hours. It's not an exact thing. It's not like it's pointed. It's a rounded thing. So a couple hours either side of midnight is a good time range to try and go and see it. You can see it earlier. Add another KP for that. So if KP3 for my area, KP4, say 9 p.m. or 3 or 4 a.m. In my area where I live, the time zones are a little weird, and noon is actually 1:15 So my midnight, my peak time where I live is actually 1:15 in the morning. So it's, I say 11 to 3 where I am, but other places it might be 10 to 2 as the prime time for aurora. Okay, you ready? The forecast is good. There's no clouds. The moon's new. You've picked out a location and you're ready to go. So you drive out into the country to your nice dark location. Make certain you turn off your car. Make certain your headlights are off. It takes a while for your eyes to adapt to the dark, and it's much harder to see the northern lights if you're sitting in a vehicle with the headlights on. You drove out of the city to get away from the lights. Don't create more lights where you are. And this is especially true if you're someplace where there's somebody else near. Respect. They also drove out into the country to get to a dark location. Please turn off your lights, and hopefully they turn off theirs as well. To me, there's nothing more magical than sitting out under a dark sky with the stars overhead, listening to the coyotes sing and watching the aurora dance. And that's what we're going for, is that outdoor experience under the stars, watching the northern lights. You need to get out of your car to do that properly. And then finally, even with being in the dark, don't expect the aurora to look like they do in the pictures. To our eyes, they are dimmer and less colorful. They do vary in brightness considerably from time to time. Sometimes they are much brighter and higher in the sky, and if they are higher up, if they're on the horizon, they're actually a long ways away from you. If they're straight above you, they're as close as they can possibly get. They're still 70 kilometers above you, but that's as close as they're going to get. And they will be brighter when they're straight overhead. And that's when really the magic happens. With those images in your mind, please check out episode 5, what you can expect to see. And I'm wishing you clear skies and happy hunting.